And we're back, everybody. Good morning. And we are with Eleanor Spring, a certified fraud examiner, and certainly a subject matter expert to New York City InfraGard Members Alliance, and we certainly appreciate it. And by the way, IGTV is a production of New York City Metro InfraGard. All right, and this is the InfraGard Fraud Series, focusing in on the small to medium-sized business community. Now, Eleanor, you were just talking about, and really we're going to get into the crux of it here, a woman hired in 2008. It seemed as though the employee's employer was being somewhat protective of her because of maybe some family circumstances, and that the employee was really leveraging that concern of the employer to really take advantage of him.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, all right. Go right ahead. Keep on going through this. This is interesting.
Well, what I wanted to say was I very quickly learned from the people that I interviewed that this woman basically got away with whatever she wanted to get away with. Nobody wanted to step on her toes. Nobody wanted to say anything to her. The last straw came when she started grabbing the mail as it was coming in. She would grab the mail, look for checks, take whatever she wanted to take, and then distribute the rest, which was not part of her job, but this is how bad things got. She would not even let anybody look at the mail that was coming in. And this was part of this employer had no internal controls whatsoever at all, and unfortunately he was victimized. He had this woman, like I said, she controlled everything: payables, receivables, payroll. And one of the rules that this gentleman had, and it was his only rule, was there was to be no overtime unless he gave the okay. And according to what he has told me, he never gave the okay, or very rarely gave the okay for anyone to have overtime. So the way this came about was the payroll company actually contacted him. And this is after about 3 years. The payroll company finally called him up and said, hey, I thought you don't allow overtime. Well, this woman has been taking overtime. This woman, in the 3 years, took overtime to the tune of $82,000 above and beyond her normal payroll. She also took about $133,000 in checks that she wrote out. And the reason she was able to write them out was that the boss, the owner of the business, allowed her to keep a signature file. So she had his signature file, and she could duplicate his signature anytime she wanted. And I saw the check. She was very good at what she did. This guy never questioned anything. I was amazed that he never questioned anything. When I asked, he said, oh yeah, I always check the payroll before I hand out the paychecks. Well, if that was the case, why didn't you catch this overtime that was happening for 3.5 years? He couldn't answer me on it. He gave this woman excuse after excuse. And by the time I finished the interview with this gentleman, I thought, you know what? He's just covering for this woman. And I don't know why, but he did. Part of me thinks he was just so afraid and so astounded by what happened that he never expected it to happen to him because he treated everyone so well. But it happened. And he had to figure out how he was going to deal with it now. And after I examined everything and I went over all the records and the $133,000 in checks, she also wrote out vendor checks for vendors that did not exist. This woman, when it came down to it, she got away with about a little over $300,000 in 3.5 years. She knocked this guy to his knees. He didn't know if he was going to be able to recover. When I came in to speak with him, he didn't know if he could afford to have a fraud investigator come in. He didn't want to hire an attorney because he didn't want to have to spend any more money. It was very difficult trying to get this guy to understand the depth of what this woman had done to him.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was just afraid. He was afraid he couldn't pay me. He was afraid he couldn't pay the attorneys. He didn't know what he was going to do. Eventually, we worked it out, and he did hire me. And one of the first things I said to him was, you really need to get an attorney on this, because this woman has basically gotten away with a lot. He kept hesitating and hesitating. I'm going to go through my insurance, and then he found that his insurance didn't cover it. And the attorneys that he did hire didn't want to make it a criminal case. They only wanted to go civil,
right?
Because he could not afford to go criminal. He just couldn't afford it anymore. He was just at his wit's end about this. And during my examination, I brought out to him, it was not only this one woman who was involved, she had 5 other employees involved. And I caught something that made me very suspicious that a bank was involved. And when I addressed this with the gentleman, I said, there's a bank involved here. We've got to bring in the FBI. We've got to get, this thing's got to get blown open. And he absolutely refused. I don't want to do it. I just want to get my money back. I don't care who did what. This is part of why we have the problems that we have. Because small to mid-sized businesses, they can't afford this type of stuff. So they just kind of sweep it under the rug. Okay, I was victimized, let's move on. I kept insisting that he go after this woman, and about 4 or 5 months later, he finally said, well, maybe I should go after this woman. Can you please tell me what home she has in her name, what bank account she has in her name? And when I originally started my interview, my investigation, I gave this gentleman a couple of homes that this woman had in her name. By the time he decided to advance further with this, 4 or 5 months had passed. And he called me up and he said, there's nothing in this woman's name. I said, of course not. You gave her enough time.
She was on to it.
That's right. You gave her enough time that she just decided to take everything out of her name. And that was it. I mean, she had houses in Florida. She had houses upstate. She had some on Long Island. This woman was doing okay for herself. And she just took everything out of her name. So now basically this employee lost $300,000. He's had to pay for a fraud investigation. He's had to pay for civil attorneys. And basically he's not going to get much back in return. So it's unfortunate, but one of the things that happens with small to mid-sized businesses, they can't afford to put the internal controls in place, or they don't know about the internal controls. They're just kind of like, well, we're a small business. Nobody's really going to come after us. Nobody's going to cause fraud in our company. It's just not going to happen. We're just too small. It's not the case. Criminals today are targeting small businesses like this woman. She did not work alone. Like I said, there's a bank involved here. But they don't realize it because nobody, you know, we're micro compared to some of these major companies out there, so nobody's really going to bother us. Truth of the matter is, the criminals are targeting small and mid-sized businesses more and more today because they can get away with more and they can do it faster. And
okay, what we got to do here, Eleanor, is we're going to do a wrap on this case. All right, and we're gonna break to a commercial in just a couple of seconds. That's why I kind of stopped you there.
Okay.
All right, and what we'll do is we're gonna get into some I guess about 7 different points I want you to get over, so that the small to medium-sized business owner who views this video later on, they can kind of have some takeaways. All right.
Sure.
So we'll be right back after this commercial, folks, with Eleanor Spring from Spring Action Fraud Elimination. Safe. All right. 1 second. See you soon.